Hi, and welcome back to another episode where you get to know more about real-life relatable people in STEM. Now, last week we had scientists within the field of microbiology share their research with us. This week we are going back in time, millions of years ago, to ancient life on Earth. And so I have 5 wonderful scientists, paleontologists, who will share how their work or research informs us about early life and the evolution of life on Earth. Now, before we begin, I've put the links to the Twitter pages of each of the scientists within this episode in the description box below. I will also be displaying their Twitter handles while they're giving their response. Make sure you give them a follow in order to find out more about what they're working on and also any cool things that they're up to. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like any videos that you've enjoyed, and comment. Let us know in the comment section what you found interesting about each episode and if you've learned something new. Right, let's begin. First up, we have Sarah Davis. She is currently working on her PhD at the University of Texas at Austin in the Jackson School of Geosciences. Her interest in paleontology began with dinosaurs after seeing their fossils on display in museums, and that interest continued to grow over time. This eventually brought her to the University of Arizona, where she majored in evolutionary biology. While studying, she also worked as a fossil preparator, spending hours chipping away layers of rock to expose bone. But her first formal research experience was in something completely different. She worked in an evolutionary biology lab, studying how birds use pigment to create their brilliant colours, and you'll hear more about this in a bit. These 2 experiences brought her to where she is today, combining colour science with her love of extinct animals. Let's hear more from Sarah.
Hi, I am Sarah, and I am a vertebrate paleontologist. I study the evolution of birds, which are the only group of dinosaurs that survived the mass extinction that occurred 66 million years ago. And I work on 2 main areas, one more focused on living birds and the other on fossils. So for my first project, I am working on coloration and how the colors of living birds can help us figure out the color of extinct birds and maybe even non-bird dinosaurs. So when an animal goes through the process of fossilization after it's died, sometimes we get really lucky and things like skin and tissues can be preserved. And this is how we know that some groups of dinosaurs were feathered while others had bumpy skin. And sometimes in extremely exceptional cases, that skin or the feather can actually preserve pigments that can then be studied and analyzed to help figure out the color that that animal was. Unfortunately, this only works for certain types of pigments, specifically the pigments that create black, brown, gray, and sometimes shiny iridescent colors. Other pigments that produce brighter colors are things like yellow and orange. Those have not been found in fossils, and those are the kinds of colors that I am interested in. So I work on a group of pigments called carotenoids, which are found across living birds and create yellow, orange, red, pink, in the skin, in the beak, and in the feathers of birds. An interesting thing about carotenoids is that they cannot be made by birds themselves. They have to be eaten before they can be used. So other things like plants and insects are high in carotenoids, or have a lot of carotenoids in them. And so when a bird eats those things, it then has these compounds available to express as coloration. And the best example of this in a living bird are flamingos. So they have that really bright pink feather coloration because of carotenoids in algae and in shrimp that they eat. And if they didn't eat those things, then they would not be pink. So you'll see that that color actually goes away if they change their diet. And I really want to know if other groups of dinosaurs could also express these colors. So could they use carotenoids to make bright yellow, orange, and red like living birds? But to figure that out, we need to have a better understanding of how use of this color works in living birds. And so that's what I'm working on right now. So to switch gears, my other project is more fossil-based. And it's looking at the diversity of theropod dinosaurs that were in South America at the end of the Cretaceous period, right before this mass extinction event. So 66 million years ago, there was a mass extinction that wiped out some major groups of animals, including all of the non-bird dinosaurs. So theropods are the group of dinosaurs that include living birds, but also the really fun pop culture guys like Tyrannosaurus rex. So we have a pretty good idea of what animals were around in North America right before the extinction, but we have less clear of a picture of what was going on in South America. So I do field work with a group of people. We go to Chilean Patagonia every year and look for fossils of dinosaurs and other animals and plants. And right now what we're doing is working to piece together these fossil remains to make a clearer picture of the environment and the animals that were around right before this really bad extinction. And so this work is ongoing, but we will hopefully have some updates soon.
Now, I don't know about you, but me personally, I find it so cool that by using the remains of animals and plants from millions of years ago, scientists can now begin to piece together a picture of what early life looked like. I think that's so cool. Now on to our next paleontologist. We have Dr. Dave Hone. After finishing school, Dave did a degree in zoology, then a master's in taxonomy, and finally a PhD in paleontology. He's had jobs in Munich, Beijing, and Dublin, and his work has taken him to Mexico, South Africa, Japan, and Canada. After working in universities, museums, and research institutes, Dave is now a senior lecturer in zoology at Queen Mary University of London. And this is actually where I did my bachelor's and PhD. Now let's go to Dave.
Hi, my name's Dr. Dave Hone and I'm a paleontologist at Queen Mary University of London in the UK. I work on a whole bunch of extinct animals, but in particular dinosaurs and pterosaurs, the flying reptiles that lived alongside dinosaurs that everyone thinks are dinosaurs but aren't really. The main area that I'm interested in is trying to work out their behaviour and their ecology. So basically how they lived their day-to-day lives. What were they doing? What were they eating? How were they finding it? How were they eating it? How did they interact and live in groups? Did they do things like migrate? And then a whole bunch of associated problems with all of this. So can we work out male and female dinosaurs, and can we tell them apart, for example? What did their growth look like? At what point did they become sexually mature? And, can we tell what are juveniles and what are adults from often limited remains? What does this mean for all kinds of different aspects of their behavior and interactions between different individuals, and then again interactions between different species? Predators will hunt and kill and eat herbivores, and herbivores don't want this to happen. Individuals will fight with each other, members of the same species, for access to things like territory or mates or food. So there's all these kinds of different interactions going on between these animals, and that's really what I try and look at. But I work on some other related subjects as well. So with things like pterosaurs, I actually look at some of their biomechanics of flight, how these things get into the air, how they're flying. Flight for obviously species like this is critical to almost their entire biology. So understanding better how well they could fly, can they deal with things like winds, can they travel long distances, are they very maneuverable, how are they on landing, how are they can they swim, what happens if they hit the water, do they drown, can they take off again, can they swim well, could they dive to get food? So all of these things interact with each other and produce the kind of stuff that I'm interested in. And this also then leads into potentially some really weird and interesting areas. Paleontology can end up driving research in all kinds of areas that people wouldn't normally expect. So work that I and my colleagues have done on pterosaur flight, for example, has been of interest to various engineering companies who are trying to make biomimetic materials. So things that have properties similar to biological structures. In this case, pterosaur wings are actually really weirdly constructed, but seem to be very good at doing certain kinds of things in a way that modern membranes for stuff like parachutes, hang gliders, next generation wingsuits, even drones would like to be able to do and currently can't do very well. And another example, I've just had a paper out in the last couple of days, again, studying the differences between male and female dinosaurs, or at least trying to work out the differences between male and females. And what we use as a model for this is a giant crocodilian species called the gharial that lives in India. The gharial is critically endangered and an animal we'd like to know a lot more about. It's been very little studied. And because me and my co-authors got together a huge data set of their of these animals based on their skulls, we're actually able to demonstrate that males and females of gharials are quite different, and that males actually, particularly very large males, appear to be doing something ecologically rather different to their others. And that's potentially quite important because, again, this is a critically endangered species. So working out that certain animals might be eating different things, and therefore we need to conserve their food populations in order to conserve them, there's potentially quite an interesting point there for their conservation. So paleontology can have these weird knock-on effects and drive research into other areas. And it's not just discovering and naming new dinosaurs, but there are real-world practical benefits to this stuff as well.
Dave made some really excellent and important points about paleontology driving research in different directions and fields. I can guarantee you that the first two things that most people would associate paleontology with is Ross from Friends and Jurassic Park. But I hope that after listening to Dave's research, we can at least now associate paleontology with its applications in, for example, biomechanics of flight, ecology and conservation. Now, up next, we have Kimberleigh Tommy. Kimberleigh is currently a PhD candidate in biological anthropology, and this she does at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa. Kimberleigh began her STEM journey wanting to become a medical doctor, but was introduced to the world of primate locomotion in her third year of studies. She then combined her love for locomotion with her passion for the past, and therefore pursued a degree in paleontology. She then completed her master's in paleontology, specializing in paleoanthropology, and afterwards went on to work as a professional science communicator before returning to pursue her PhD. Kimberleigh has now branched out into anatomical sciences so that she can improve her understanding of the human body and human variation, and apply her work to not only understanding the past, but contributing to the present. There are very few women, especially women of colour and Africans, involved in paleosciences, although Africa is very rich in fossil heritage. And so Kimberleigh is very passionate about changing this. Now let's hear more about Kimberleigh's research.
My name is Kimberleigh Tommy, and I am a biological anthropologist, and I study the evolution of upright or bipedal walking in our species Homo sapiens. So walking on two legs is actually a defining characteristic of our species, as well as of our fossil hominin ancestors that aren't alive today. And this characteristic evolved even before our big brains did. But if you had to Google human evolution today, something that might pop up is known as the March of Progress or the March of Man, which depicts our evolution as some kind of linear progression from a chimpanzee-like ancestor that's bent over with a bent knee posture, slowly transitioning, standing upright, and eventually looking like modern humans today. But this image is flawed for a number of reasons, and firstly because it simplifies our evolution, when actually it's really complex. So today, paleoanthropologists realize that it is not a straight line, it's not even a branching tree, but it's described as more of a braided stream. And this is because of all of this hybridization and mixing of our hominin ancestors. Another reason why this image is flawed is because it depicts the evolution of our locomotion as something that is linear as well. But what we know from studying fossil hominins is that this evolution actually involves quite a lot of experimentation on the part of hominins. So hominin morphology is often described as mosaic, meaning that it's a mixture of some features that we'd expect to see in humans and some features that we'd expect to see in non-human primates. And this complex morphology reflects their lifestyle and a lot of variation within the fossil record. So some hominins were really well adapted to climbing trees and were comfortable in an arboreal lifestyle, while others were fully bipedal, but could have possibly been climbing more when they were children. So there's a lot of variation within these extinct hominins that we are only fully beginning to understand now, and reconstructing this behavior is an ongoing process. But studying the bones of these hominins and this important transition helps us to not only better understand our own bodies and to appreciate our own bodies, but to also understand our complex African origins.
What an interesting research topic. I find hope that we're able to scrap that whole linear march of man image that Kimberleigh was referring to. And I do hope that one day soon we do get an image of human evolution that shows this, mixing of our different common ancestors and sort of alludes to this complexity of upright or bipedal walking. Now on to our fourth paleontologist, we have Yara Haridy. Yara is a PhD student at the Natural History Museum in Berlin, Germany. As a kid, Yara was always fascinated by the natural world, but did not know that there could be careers in the field. So she studied general biology as an undergrad at the University of Toronto in Canada, where she got to indulge her love for natural science on her way to studying for medical school. Now, in order to set apart her medical school application from the rest, she volunteered in an anatomy lab. And the only one on campus that she knew of was a paleontology lab. This is when she fell in love with the field. She then did a master's in the evolution of reptile teeth, and this sparked her curiosity for evolution through deep time, eventually leading her to her current PhD. Now let's hear more about Yara's research.
Hi everyone, I'm Yara Haridy and I'm a paleontologist at the Museum for Natural History in Berlin. I'm a PhD student here, and what I study is bone evolution. So when you ask me what can we learn from early life, or what we know about early life, we actually know quite a bit, especially in the areas that I'm interested in, which are the evolution of bone. So basically, what can we know about why our bones today are the way they are, how they've changed through time, and how they got the abilities they have today. And I do this by studying modern animals and comparing them to long extinct animals, and I specifically compare their bone. So for example, here's a little fox skull, and it's shaped exactly for that animal, and it changes throughout its life. While I don't study foxes in particular, I study in general just bone tissues in several mammals and other animals, and then compare what makes their bones to what makes fossil bones. And I can do this through histology, so I basically slice up fossils and look at the cell structures, and I can do this by making really, really thin sections and putting them under a microscope. And there's cell spaces that actually fossilize, and from there you can tell cell density, and you can tell how the cells communicated with each other, how the animal grew, and even sometimes how it healed. And we can do this by finding fossils with fractures or pathologies. And from that we actually learn quite a bit about how ancient animals healed, how ancient bone works, and this informs how our own bones came to be the way they are today.
Paleontology at the cellular level, how awesome is that? And it all connects, cellular interactions to tissue structure, to organ morphology and characteristics, to biological function, to whole animal behavior, which is often influenced by the environment. There's a story to be told here, and paleontologists like Yara are striving to piece it all together. Last but not least, we have Ashley Hall. Ashley is a marketing coordinator at the Nature Center at Shaker Lakes. Ashley is a dynamic paleontologist, science communicator, naturalist, and science educator. After attending Indiana University Bloomington, where she received her BA in anthropology and animal behavior, Ashley has spent a decade working as a science educator for various educational institutions. Passionate about educating the public about natural history, Ashley is a phenomenal public speaker and has designed and given thousands of museum tours, programs, and classes for visitors of all ages. Let's hear more from Ashley.
Hi everyone, my name is Ashley Hall and I am a paleontologist. Paleontology is the study of ancient life, and for most of my research I have looked at sauropod dinosaurs. Sauropod dinosaurs are known as the long-necked dinosaurs. So you've probably seen something like Brachiosaurus or Brontosaurus before, Camarasaurus, and specifically, we've been looking at their feet. So on this little model, it's actually not a bad depiction of sauropod feet. They have very long claws on their back feet and very short, if any, claws on their front feet. So our big question was, what are they doing with their feet? As it turns out, they are actually probably excavating nests. Now, this is not a sauropod baby. This is actually a little duck-billed dinosaur that I've had since I was 4 years old, since I got interested in paleontology. But basically, when you look at sauropod nests, they have this very long kind of trough-like shape to them. And we think that what they were doing with their back feet is taking their feet and kind of excavating a nest, very similar to what turtles do today. If you ever watch a turtle dig a nest, you've probably all seen sea turtle nest digging videos where they take their back feet and excavate like a nest. So sauropods were digging these nests, they're laying massive amounts of eggs, and then walking away. They're not the best parents. So anyway, if you want to read more about my research and my husband's research, it's in Dinosaur Tracks, Next Steps by IU Press. It's a really awesome book. And then also in my career, I've been an educator at several museums, including the Los Angeles County Museum, La Brea Tar Pits, and the Raymond M. Alf Museum. I'm a huge proponent of STEM and women in STEM, and this is an amazing book that touches on the inequalities of women in the geosciences, called The Bearded Lady Project, and this is an excellent, excellent book. It is basically a take on, people would take me more seriously if I had a beard, because traditionally men in the sciences are depicted as white male, they have beards, they're sort of rugged looking, and so women wearing makeup and fashionable clothing has not really been looked at as, being taken seriously as a scientist. So this book touches on the stories and struggles of women in the geosciences. So if you're interested in paleontology, you can follow me on my Twitter, on my Instagram, and on our Facebook page, Paleontology Education Facebook page. And my handle on my own channels is @LadyNaturalist. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you online.
Science really surprises me every day. I had naively thought that dinosaurs use their feet solely for walking, but apparently they could have also been using their feet to excavate nests like turtles. And if you have seen turtles excavate, it is honestly, arguably, one of the cutest things you could possibly see. So Ashley has definitely, at least for me, given me a new perspective on dinosaurs. So that concludes this episode, where I have asked paleontologists to tell us about their work and how it may answer questions about early life and the evolution of life on Earth. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with these experts. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions. Please remember to subscribe to this channel for more content, like any videos that you've enjoyed, and let us know in the comments section what you found interesting. I'll see you soon. Bye.